but welcome everybody. This is the February 28th, 2022 meeting of the Newcastle Environmental Review Board. Let the record reflect that present are myself, Jonathan Rosenblum, David Horowitz, and Ivan Alter. Dennis Corelli is in attendance, and it looks like we have 3 people. Is everybody here related to the application?
Yes.
Right. Okay. Yeah, Stephanie and Paul, I recognize your names from the application. And Mr. Feldman?
He's the homeowner.
Yes, I'm here. Yep.
Okay, great. Okay, first order of business though is the approval of the minutes from the meeting of December 20th, 2021. Anybody have any questions, comments on the minutes? David, Ivan, Dennis? Okay. Dennis, I had one question about it. If you or somebody could go over the tape in the 3rd paragraph of the discussion of the Lee permit, the last line where we were discussing what the existing deck was made of.
Okay.
The last sentence doesn't seem to make sense to me. The last sentence, as it's written in the minutes, says, Mrs. Lee stated that is correct, in response to my question as to what the existing deck was made of.
I see. Okay.
So,
That's why they're recorded. We could get that answer probably. So sounds
yeah,
good.
yeah, I'm sure you'll be able to get a better sense of it from the tape.
Okay. I'll check
Okay.
that. Thank you.
Other than that, I don't have any comments. So with that one correction being made by Dennis, I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes from December 20th.
Motion to approve the minutes.
Second,
I'll second.
all in favor? Minutes
I
are
have to
approved.
abstain, right? Because I was absent from the meeting. So
Oh,
put me down as an abstention, but that goes with the majority, so you're good.
I guess that works. Otherwise, Dennis, you'll check with our rules expert. And if we have to, if Ted does not join us and we have to put it over till next month, we can always put it over till next month. Not a problem. Okay. Matter at hand for tonight is application. Where are we here? '97 Random Farms Drive, Chappaqua. Who's going to be presenting?
If it's all right with Paul, I thought that I would share my screen of both my drawings and his drawing. If it was all right, I would give an overview again, because it's been a while since we've been back. And then Paul can discuss his mitigation plan. Does that sound good?
Sounds good to us.
Okay, let me share my screen then. Okay, so it's been a while since we've been in front of the board. We did sort of an introductory meeting back in June of 2021, just to introduce the project and get some general feedback, which was very productive for us, because I think that it's made us, prepare a more substantial application. That being said, not much has changed in the scope of the project. Just to sort of recap, like I said, since it was so long ago. What we are proposing here is to remove this existing deck on the back of the house and replace it with a new deck, which is going to extend the length of the back of the house, as well as removing these retaining walls, these planting beds, as well as the existing stone walkways, and replace it with a new stone patio. The stone patio will have sitting walls and a fireplace as well, and stairs down to the backyard. This is actually the location of the existing walkway to the driveway, which will probably, it's in disrepair, so it needs to be replaced, but that footprint is staying relatively relatively the same. Additionally, there's an existing wood fence along this portion of the property, which is also in disrepair. We are proposing to replace it with essentially deer fencing. I'm calling for a permanent deer fence, but as part of, it's my understanding, like I said, Paul can probably speak to it a little bit better, but as part of his proposal, he needs to also provide temporary deer fencing in order to establish the new plantings. Let me just give you some more visuals of the existing conditions. So again, this is the existing deck, retaining wall, walkways, planting beds and such in this area, which is essentially being just repurposed. And then the deck will extend here to the corner, close to the corner of the house. In the photos, you can see these are the stairs down from the deck. Oops, oh, I'm sorry. Leading down to that, paved area, additional walkways, railroad tie retaining walls and things like that. Here is a pine tree that will need to be removed as part of the project. We've made an application for that as well. Just an overview of the rear of the house. As I said, this deck will be removed and it will be replaced and extended to near the corner of the house at this location. As part of the, so there's a lot of calculations on this sheet, but I sort of did a summation area calculation sheet just to sort of give the key points of what the project is. So the original deck was 379 square feet. We're proposing to add a new 590 square foot deck. That increases what the town of Newcastle considers building coverage by 211 square feet. Of course, we also have the category of developmental coverage. For that, we take into account the new building coverage of 211 square feet for the deck and the new patio area of 558 square feet for a total new development area of 769 square feet. That being said, it can be argued whether or not you want to or not. It's really, I don't think, super important, but there's those other sort of gray areas of retaining walls, walkways, stairs, planting beds, and things like that, which have been developed. It's just not as substantially developed as say, a patio or something like that. Those areas amount to about 306 square feet. Technically, I guess, it could be as little as 463 square feet that this project is actually providing new impact on. That being said, I did some takeoffs from Paul's plans. He's providing a mitigation planning area of 5,300 square feet, which is well above any of these numbers to try and mitigate any of this, disturbance on the site. That also, to piggyback on that, the project itself is not going to trigger, the requirements of stormwater retention, just because the area is so minute. But that being said, you know, we also don't want, you know, in instances of severe, you know, 100-year storms and things like that, to have this new impervious area impact the wetlands at all. So what I was proposing, which was sort of just as minimal, to also to try to limit any sort of disturbance, further disturbance on the site, by meaning in terms of Coltex or dry wells and things like that. We could do an infiltration trench that would border the outer edge of the patio. We would have a grass filter strip, and then we would just put some perforated pipe in gravel and top that with mulch. And of course, there could be plantings, you know, in the grass areas or whatever. But that is just sort of to take off any excessive amount of runoff that could be posed from the new patio. Certainly, you know, we would provide, and that's what this shows. This is obviously the patio, the lighter hatch. Actually, hang on. Sorry, let me go to a blow up, which would probably help more. Oops. There we go. So we have the patio with the sitting walls. Then we would have the filter strip, and then we would have the actual infiltration trench here. And then, you know, we would pitch the patio towards the wall, provide weep holes so that it would, you know, weep out to the infiltration area. In terms of the mitigation plan, like I said, that is Paul's expertise. He did a great job. We met with Dennis last week on site. We discussed a variety of things, but I will pass off to Paul, if that's okay with him.
Before you do that, Stephanie, if you could, that infiltration strip that goes around the new patio,
Yes.
what will that, may you mentioned it, what will that appear like from the surface, from the ground?
Oh, okay. So let me go back to that detail. So the wall will come down, you know, there's going to be a, you know, somewhat of a retaining wall, you know, for the patio, and then it's going to have the sitting wall, right? So that would be, you know, 30 inches from here, it would come down. And then there's going to be a grass strip at the base of the wall, which is going to be sloped to the infiltration trench, and the infiltration trench will be topped with mulch. So it's not that you're going to actually see the gravel or anything like that. So
to the right of the filter strip is the bottom of a retaining wall?
Correct. But again, it depends on which way you're looking. So basically the patio retaining wall is going to come down. You're going to have a grass strip, a 30-inch grass strip, and then you'll have a 30-inch mulch strip
Right.
around
And
the
then the
base
first
of
one
the
is what you have listed as grass filter strip from patio.
Correct. Because what that is that if there are any large, you know, particles and things like that, it's going to get caught in the grass. And then the smaller particles will get filtered by the gravel, and then even, you know, more filtered by the perforated pipe. Sorry.
So how high is that retaining wall going to be? Is it just like a curb from the?
Well, there is going to be a sitting wall. So, you know, the sitting wall will be, you know, about 18 inches high. But it's the intention to really work, that's not the right, with the existing grade there, and really not change the grade too much. Sorry, you can see here in this picture, you know, it's just sort of like a naturally, well, it's already developed at a certain elevation, and we're just going to keep that elevation. Now there is a drop. There's an existing stone wall here along where the fence line is. That's going to exist. It's a, like, you know, just a tumblestone wall. You know, obviously there will be elevation because of the sitting walls, but we're going to pretty much work with the existing grade that's there. And maybe there's a better picture from the other direction. Let me see, so you can see it. Does that help any, maybe?
Do you have a section through that wall?
No, not yet, just because I figured we were still in discussion with materials and size and location and things like that. But, you know, it's going to be a concrete block wall. And that it'll have the veneer of you know, natural stone on both sides. And then we'll have a bluestone cap.
So
And-
there's a footing, a masonry wall, and then you're cladding it with stone.
Yeah, so there'll be a footing, yes. And that was also sort of the other reason for proposing this, is that we're going to be going down anyway. So, you know, you're going to provide probably, you know, perforated pipe for the footing at some point. And so then, you know, we'll also at the same time of excavation, you can, and to, like I said, to limit the disturbance, you know, you can provide the infiltration trench at the same time, because it's got, the earth is going to be exposed for the footing.
Will you need some kind of formal drainage for the patio itself?
Well, I think that we can slope the patio, and then we'll have weep holes within the sitting wall. But my intention was not, again, you know, the amount of impervious area that we're adding is really minimal, you know, based on what's already existing there. And so to sort of limit the amount of further disturbance on the site, I didn't want to have to provide, for lack of a better word, built retention or anything like that. Because then, you know, then you're really talking about serious excavation and
So what's the surface of the patio going to be? Is it going to be
it's
impervious?
gonna be stone. It'll be stone, but again, it'll be sloped, and then it'll weep towards the wall, towards this wall here. And then run off into the infiltration trench. Does that make sense?
Will the perforated pipe in the infiltration trench terminate anywhere?
It terminates at both ends, and there'll be a clean out there. But again, it's perforated pipe, so the intention is that you know, whatever water is going to be collected through the gravel and everything like that, that it's going to naturally absorb into the soil. Clearly, if there's really such an extreme rain event that there's just too much water, then what's going to end up happening is it'll bubble up on the ends, and then it'll spill further into the yard. But I would say that that's more of a, you know, really, really extreme sort of weather event, rain event.
So again, so when you say weep holes,
Mhm.
they'll go completely through the wall?
Yes,
Okay, so in other words, they'll go from any water that pools or accumulates on the patio will be able to go into and find its way to one of the weep holes in the wall and go all the way through to the outside.
correct. To the other side of the wall, correct.
That's what I mean, to the outside of the wall.
Because the other thing is, I mean, I guess we could add a drain, a yard drain type situation. But I think that those are, you know, problematic in that, you know, again, even if we added a yard drain somewhere in the center and pitched it all to the center, then we still have to connect that pipe and you know, disperse of, you know, the collection area, or even two drains. I mean, we could certainly do that. But, you know, then we're talking about, you know, just honestly, additional maintenance, even just of the drain. You know, those tend to really get filled up with leaf and debris and things like that. And, you know, they have a relatively short lifespan for functioning because they get clogged and, you know, they don't work anymore.
It wouldn't be unlike a tennis court. You know, the tennis court is pitched to drain one side, and you'd put a long infiltration trench just like this. So imagine if we could straighten this out, it'd be like handling the runoff for a tennis court.
And that's true, Paul, that even, believe it or not, I mean, the curve does add a little bit of a uniqueness to it, but again, if you did just straighten it out, it would be much probably clearer and more understandable.
Well, if you straightened it out, you'd be much less likely to get any kind of pooling also. All right.
Yeah, but then if I were to straighten it out, then I wouldn't be working with the existing grade.
Right.
So that was really the intention. This shape was generated through the existing, contour lines. So it's not just something I made up in my head.
No.
Which sometimes I do, but not in this case.
Okay. Thanks. Okay. David, Ivan, do you have any other questions on this aspect of it? Before we go, let Paul talk about the mitigation.
I don't.
Just from a maintenance standpoint, just from a little experience, putting some plastic pipe through the wall, the ability of that pipe to get clogged or have something stuck in it versus a floor drain where you could keep the water from just in the muddy condition, just from pooling around the perimeter. Just something to think about. You can always clean out the drain, lift it out and clean it out for sand and muck. But when those weeps get clogged, they can be a little more difficult to try to route out. Something gets, a rock gets stuck in there, or some leaves get stuck in there, and they block up pretty quickly.
Yeah, I'm not adverse to, the yard drain. I just thought that having the, the filtration strip would be a nicer filter, a nicer feature. But, again, it's really,
No, as an idea, it's a good idea.
it's just, again, it's the same amount of work. So whatever, if the board has a strong opinion one way or the other, I'm not opposed to having a yard drain.
Just a conversation, just an observation.
Okay. So this is Paul's mitigation. Is this where you want to start, Paul?
But I'm sorry, just one other thing. If you do need to get footings in, the area of impact and your temp protection area just should be considered, because then you're going to start going, 2 or 3
Right,
feet.
well, yeah, that's true. But I mean, the overall impact, even if you didn't take into account any of the, potential discounts, we're talking about under 800 square feet. And then if we were to add, that, even, 20% to that, the mitigation area is over 5,000 square feet. So, we're like.
Understood. This is just for during the work phase.
Okay.
To show, where you're going to put the spoils. And is this, you going to use a machine or hand dig this?
I think that it's going to probably maybe have to be a combination of both, because the new wall is going to be sitting on relatively close to the existing that rubble retaining wall that you really can't see on the site unless you're down into the wetlands. So I think for that area, they're probably going to have to hand dig some of that. But I think some of it could probably be machined.
And how high is
probably a very small machine too, because, really there's not a lot of room there either,
Right. And that rock wall that's remaining? So
Yes.
there's no impact
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Not
So,
touching.
up or down slope from that rock wall?
No, not touching.
yeah. So I don't know if I have a good picture. It's not visible because the grade basically just drops off here at this point. If I zoom on this picture, can you see it? So maybe you can see a little bit the stones sticking up here. And then it just drops down about 3 feet from this grass area down into the wetlands area. And so we're not touching any of that.
And that wall is stable and doesn't need any repairs to it?
It's pretty natural. What really needs a repair is the fence. The fences is actually set in concrete, which is obviously mistake number one for the wood fence. One reason why it's into disrepair. So all those footings will be removed. And then, the deer fencing is it just goes into the ground. There's not going to be any, any footings for those. But I think the wall, maybe they'd have to, in the area of the patio, they might have to, shore it up or something like that if the ground moves a little bit, but otherwise it looks it's fine. Yeah.
Right, so there's no work to the rock wall being requested as part of this application?
No,
No.
Okay,
No, and just to interject, if I remember it correctly, Paul and Stephanie, there's almost like a slight batter, I'd say, to that wall. So I didn't really look at it as like this, kind of perfectly vertical structure.
Yeah.
It kind of, works a little bit with the slope to, sort of transition to that lower elevation, really where the wetland kind of just begins. So, to the point of the applicant, if it doesn't have to be messed with, I wouldn't look to mess with it, so.
yeah, you're right, Dennis. It's not like we keep calling it a wall, and it is a wall, but it's not, when you think it's not the kind of wall that I'm proposing, let's put it that way. It's not the footing and it's natural. And it's just providing a natural boundary between the wetlands and the more developed area. So
okay. Thank you.
natural, kind of, clearly man-made, but as natural as possible.
What, was it rubble that they put in there originally to level the site enough to build a house?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I bet you.
That sounds right.
That's what it sounds like. I got one of those in my house too.
I got about 4 of those at my house. Hang on, I'm scrolling, sorry. Oh, I think I'm zoomed in too much. There we go.
Can you go down just a little lower?
Sure. To this plan?
Yeah, we'll look at that one first, and then once I get done with that, if you just go up, that'll be fine. For the record, Paul Janik, I was the fellow that mapped the wetlands on the site and prepared, along with the discussions with Stephanie and the client, the mitigation plan. I first put a map together called the existing conditions map, which gives you a overview of what it looks like out at the site right now. And if you look at this line right here that's highlighted in chartreuse, that is the wetland boundary. And as you can see, as we get near the boulder wall, which is shown right here, okay, this boulder wall, it gets pretty darn close to the base of the boulder wall. So we have about a 2.5 to 3 foot drop. And then from here over to this woodland edge, and this is a woodland edge that I'm showing right here, it's very gently sloped, less than 10% slope. Some people would just call it pretty flat. And this land all in here, which is swampland, and this woodland border here is very gently sloped also. So everything's sloped, draining to the north. And by the way, this is towards the property line over here is to the west, and that's the easterly direction. So north south is like this. So anyhow, so we have a woodland border, and in the woodland border we've depicted some of the trees types. Basically, for the most part, maples, red maples, various diameters, not hugely specimen trees, a couple of locusts here, and a large red maple right here, and then another one over here. This area here is pretty much open wet meadow, And then when we get in here, it's a pretty thick swampland. The types of plants that are in this area, I've got depicted on here. Here is like soldiers in a row, or a bunch of boxwoods which were planted by a prior owner. And we've got some Andromeda, and the understory all in here is very open. So these trees are pretty much all you see, and there's really no shrub understory. Even when you get into the swampland area, it's still pretty open. It's until you get about 50 or 60 feet that it gets pretty dense. I will say though, up here on the western end of the wetland, it's pretty dense shrub understory. So when this wet portion of the wetland, the western portion that's open, it was previously disturbed by probably in the course of developing this property. So it's not surprising you get kind of a hodgepodge of things like jewelweed, poison ivy, Japanese stilt grass, some goldenrods, and the ground is still somewhat uneven, probably due to any machine work that was done, possibly related to this boulder wall being installed. And also along the woodland edge is a dilapidated, disrepair wooden fence, which we are going to get rid of. So the plan here is to basically remove the wooden fence and install plantings of a variety of trees, shrubs, herbaceous plants, no changes in grading. And the boxwoods that you see down here that are linear, we're gonna take them out and just replant them so they look in a more natural setting. So if we could go to the up here, we have our proposed mitigation plan. It's colored. Each little area that you look at has a code on it. For instance, this one says INK, and then there's a slash with 12. That indicates in that area that it's going to be shrubs of inkberry, and in that planting area, planting bed, will be 12 inkberry shrubs. And if you go to the key over here, this highlights the trees. Got about 5 trees, 108 shrubs, and 340 herbaceous plants. And the type, the size, and quantities of each are shown here. And we would pepper them in to basically in this area to make a more diversified structure with trees being planted here, shrubs, and then interspersed with herbaceous plants. Many of the types we've chosen are more of the evergreen variety. This was a preference of the property owner. We had no objection to it, but they're native and they're they're going to be quite deer resistant. Along the border of the wetland, between the wetland edge and the boulder wall, which we're not going to take down, we're going to plant this with a number of winterberry shrubs. And then on the upslope side of the boulder retaining wall, we're going to put a little buffer in here in the non-wetland area. This is now lawn. We're going to plant shrubs and herbaceous, and then we're going to intersperse it with some rather large boulders, which we've shown down here in our key. They're about 3 to 4 feet by 3 feet by 2 feet. And they're actually going to be placed all along this border where the fence is. So the idea being is it's just going to soften the edge. And this is more or less to soften where the lawn is, retaining wall, and it's a safety feature. As Stephanie mentioned, not only we're going to put a temporary deer fencing around the whole area, but there is a black vinyl fence that's going to go right along the edge of the boulder wall and terminate, I think about here, if I recall, or does it continue down this way, Stephanie?
I think it comes down this way a little bit, yeah.
And it's going to be, maximum 6 feet high. There's a detail we've provided. It's going to be installed by pounding into the ground, black vinyl fence, and they'll have openings at the bottom for any little critters. Yes, there's a detail that we're highlighting to show the clearance underneath for small animals, really. So, and then there'd be that shrub border to the resident side of this fence. So the fence would basically be, going back up here, tucked between the wall and this planting border, and then right along the edge of the planting border down here. And the purpose of the fence is twofold. It's probably more to keep the kids out, not the wildlife from coming in. It's really a safety issue. The Feldmans have some young children. I noticed they had some sports soccer nets. So it's really just so mommy and daddy don't have to retrieve items thrown by the kids towards the wetlands till they get proficient enough to not do that. And if that ever happens, you never know. And the details related to the planting of everything is on the very, there, correct, right here, general planting notes. And then, of course, the details for the anchoring of trees and the planting of the shrubs. We would have we have some general notes related to preparation of any, let's see, any bare soil areas that might be disturbed. We're not planning on doing any regrading, but if in the course of installing any of the plantings, if we wreck up any of the lawn, we'll get everything back to in order. Excuse me. I think I lost you there. The other thing, I lost everybody. Hold on. Oh, there it goes. Sorry, it blanked out at my end. And then we have a general note over in the lower right-hand corner, prohibition against the use of application of pesticides, herbicides, et cetera, within the wetland buffer. And detail provided for the temporary silt fencing. The silt fencing will just be on the woodland side of the planting area, just really as a deterrent so the workers won't inadvertently migrate into the area. And all the installation of these items, including the trees, will be done by hand or handheld equipment. Won't be any machines going in there. Won't be taking any trees down in the area. I think the only thing that's coming down is that pine tree that's over in the patio area.
That's correct. Yeah.
Yes.
At least that's what I'm proposing. I don't know what you're proposing.
Yeah, so in this area that I've got is the mitigation area, there won't be any trees, plantings, trees or shrubs to be removed. And the boxwoods that I talked about, that's 1, 2, 3 areas. So we're just going to replant them so they're just a little more staggered looking. The owner liked the boxwoods, so we'll keep them in there, but we're just realigning them. And that's pretty much all I can tell you. If there are any questions, happy to provide them.
Paul, you talked about an area, I guess, inside of the fence, where the boulders are being placed. That
right there.
Now, yeah, that's now lawn.
Oh yes, this area right here. Yes. Correct.
Did you do a calculation of the exact area of how much lawn is being reclaimed?
I don't have a number. I could certainly, easily give you one. Matter of fact, I could probably calculate it right now if you really like. Just give me 2 seconds here.
I just think it should, if it's a more than de minimis number, it's useful in calculating effectively how much mitigation there is as opposed to new disturbance.
It's about It's about 250 to 300 square feet of lawn area.
I guess my other question was, to what extent did you consult with Dennis in coming up with the specifics of the planting plan?
Hmm.
And what's
We met-
Dennis's take on it?
Well, we met out at the site and we just, and he was, privy to the plan. We discussed what we wanted to do. There didn't appear to be any objection.
Yeah, I sort of, obviously Paul has, submitted plans before on other applications. So Stephanie said, when we'll contact you, Paul's going to develop a plan and, when available, would you, be willing to meet out on the site? I said that would be a good idea. And Paul did describe, it is, the wetland, it's kind of unique, that sort of open area, because it does transition to a fairly dense shrubland, which obviously is nothing negative about that. And, the woods, like all the woods, are fairly open thanks to, all of our hungry deer. So, there was, this was like one of these cases where it seemed to, satisfy both the perspective of, looking to plant for the purposes of, improving, some of the areas so close to the developed, portion of the property of the wetland, while simultaneously for, preference reasons of the applicant ose preferring, some of the evergreens, and in the cases obviously of the ilex, that's, those are beneficial, quality species and plantings. So that, that was not an issue. And also, if you kind of go up to the top of the drawing, and you saw them in some of the photos, there is a row of existing Norway spruces. I think that sort of serve as a border
These
to the
guys.
adjacent property. I think that's what they were, right? So, there was, I didn't have any, issue even from, if someone had an aesthetic. I was like, well, there's evergreen, trees, which obviously more landscape species, but, in transitioning into the wetland, I don't think that would be it's not going to be bad for the function of the wetland, and it's not going to be a bad look either. The only thing that I had concern with, that I didn't echo the first time, because probably since there wasn't a plan, I just, wasn't really thinking about it. And we've had some applications since, one of them actually before the planning board, is, in consideration of, and you could leave this up because where it says existing site photo, kind of when you look into the background, and even when you look at an aerial, right next to this property is a fair amount of woodland, and it is a conservation subdivision. And the only reservation I have is, and we haven't even spoken, or I don't know if Stephanie has, but the building inspector may have some comment as well, especially in consideration of the low and Norway spruces. To have an outdoor wood burning fireplace, I would probably honestly object to, because my main concern would be it's preventable. And by it's, I mean any migrating ember past that white fence, if something were to happen, and it's, how did you, how were you behind this as the environmental coordinator? I don't think I would be behind it. And I know that we've had, and it was in the Meadow Hill subdivision, there's a house that received approval, and they were proposing to put just an outdoor fire pit next to a pool. And as it got close to the property line, one of the comments in my review memo was, oh, and I'm curious what the fuel's going to be for the outdoor, at which point the chairman basically almost didn't let me finish and cut me off and said, yeah, I was curious about the same thing, because we have, I know that there's mixed feelings about, when they start burning, people have complained about smells, people like the smells. And, I know that board sort of was expressing their preference was that, when it comes to those types of applications, that they would prefer gas. And, if this is going to be used for cooking, I'm not going to look to regulate that. But in terms of fuel source, the wood is a problem for me. Other than that, I was, kind of pretty much wrapped around everything else that was proposed, project-wise and, planting-wise and concept of mitigation.
If I could
Before
just
before we go back to your concern on the fireplace, Dennis, so in terms, again, of the plantings themselves, you're convinced that the mix that Paul's proposed, or they have a decent chance of flourishing there, and with the right maintenance, they should be able to do the trick?
Yeah, especially with the fencing. I didn't see any mulching in the notes. You don't need that. I don't disagrry with the watering, but some of those plants, I'm sure, and Paul will admit from knowing the area, I'm sure they'll do okay even without watering. Because
Yeah.
especially where you look to put the tussock sedge, it's got to be pretty wet there, and it is. It transitions to fairly wet there. So the herbivory control is important, and I think especially for the early plantings, because they are deer resistant species, but ultimately, they don't always get the memo. I noticed they still have to go out and sample and be like, oh yeah, right, I really don't like this. But by the time they determine that, they did a number on your installation. So I think it'll work.
If I could just interject, I did give you a little history of this wetland, but the area, most of the area that we're proposing to do mitigation, both wetland and non-wetland areas, are previously disturbed. So the reason why this area on the west end of the wetland, which has no tree canopy, it's somebody, when this was developed, and a prior owner, they clearly did some disturbances there, not only just removal of vegetation, but they must have gone in with something, because the ground it's definitely, the soil borings I took indicated that they're wetlands, but the profile's been mixed up or disturbed. And just walking around there, you can kind of get a sense that somebody's been in here with something at some point in time, many years ago, of course. And there is a utility easement that goes along the west end of the property, so it might have been related to getting in the adjacent property where there's a shared drainage structure. So the thought being is that what we're doing is we're beefing up the vegetative cover, making it more diverse in a wetland that is previously disturbed. So at the end of the day, we have something that's much better wetland habitat than it is there now. So that's why we kind of focused on the wetland area for the bulk of the mitigation.
I'm not sure if you gentlemen still have it, but part of our original application, Paul went, in addition to obviously flagging the existing wetlands, he prepared a wetlands report, which we did submit back last year. If you guys are interested, we could certainly provide that, for you again. But he did a great job of summing it up. But he gets, very specific as to the quality of the wetlands and so forth in his report as well.
Well,
Also-
I'm okay personally. If Dennis is okay on this.
Yeah, and also too, if you to Paul's point, not speaking to the soils, I'm not disagreeing with them on that. The only extra point I was going to make was, it had, there was a look to me that, you're standing there on the lawn area and you're looking at this open area, and then it, in the distance it kind of transitions, quickly to like dense shrubs. And I said, there's opportunity here for, like, what I mean, more of an ease of transition to go from lawn to, some other type of environs, and then, off into the, more thicket, right? that, you know, organisms would totally be, you know, anybody that wanted to utilize that would be obviously, you know, well shielded. So I think, you know, to Paul's plan, I think it does that, frankly. So you know, that's why I had no objection, because when I first saw it, that's kind of where my thinking was. So I'm good.
Also, in terms of the likelihood of success of the plants, they've included a 3-year monitoring and replacement period in the notes. So
That's
if
correct.
anything is not
Correct.
successful, it looks like they'll be replacing.
That's correct.
All right, so not to give Dennis short shrift or cut him off, do you want to talk a little bit about the proposal for the fireplace?
Sure. So obviously, you know, my clients would be preferable to wood burning. I didn't know if Dennis would consider anything in terms of even say a cover with a cap, or even, you know, and a screen. But you know, if it's such a strong opinion, then, you know, we can certainly go to propane. But I think that sort of the idea of having an outdoor fireplace is to have it wood burning, you know, and not have to have a gas insert. Otherwise, they could easily have done that, you know, inside their home.
But so the purpose of this is aesthetic, it's not to cook? This is not?
No, my client does want to be able to cook paella in a giant paella pan. That's actually the motivating factor for the fireplace.
Dennis, actually, to tell you the truth, this is the first time I've ever heard anything about the sensitivity and issues having been raised with respect to either the design or the fuel requirements for outdoor fireplaces like this.
There's been a transition, you know, because we do get a fair number of complaints in our department, but that's not really my motivating factor. You know, if, you know, who smells smoke, who doesn't smell smoke, that I kind of just, you know, I didn't save it as a file, so it's difficult to show. But like, if you look at the position of the house, you know, from an aerial photo perspective, and just look at the remainder of the property that they own that's not developed, it's just, it's all, you know, woody, trees, shrubs, overgrowth, obviously, you know, understory, and it would be fairly close, obviously, to where this fireplace would be. So it's just, I just have reservation. It's just a feeling.
Is the location of the fireplace shown on the drawing?
It is.
Yeah.
So
Is that the rectangle in the new patio?
yes, this is on the site plan. This
Yeah.
illustrates the patio. There's on the floor plan. Sorry. It's located here.
And just to clarify, this hasn't been discussed with anybody else, like the building inspector or anything, right? This is just,
No,
at this point, with respect to the fireplace, just here?
No, it is not.
Okay.
Does the building inspector, the building department, have they expressed sensitivity to these issues?
Well, I should quantify that. So when I first started the project, there was a potential zoning issue with the deck. So I did submit the whole project to the building department for review, to trigger the denial so that we could go to zoning. And what the inspector, he had a great suggestion, because we were really only off by a foot, was to pull the deck back so that we could avoid a variance. But I can say that in that conversation, he did not mention, and his concern was the deck. His concern was not the patio. But again, it wasn't a formal full review, so.
Right, and if he was looking at the deck, he may not have been focusing on the patio aspect of it at all.
That I don't know.
Right. So Dennis, what I hear from you is a couple of different kinds of sensitivity. One is objectionable odors that mostly complaints would come from neighbors. Second,
Yes.
that I heard from you though, would be stray sparks or embers, that might be dangerous because of the close proximity to the wooded areas. Would that concern be alleviated by putting, I don't know, I saw one of the drawings that Stephanie was showing showed a grate.
Yeah, we could put a cap on it, or we could put a screen doors like we would have inside your home.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, I just, right, I don't want an open pit, which I know you didn't show, and, to have, such a, I can't have it like shooting out the chimney, it's all the concerns. And honestly, if this was, if this house happened to be next to a large body of water, I wouldn't have even brought this up. So, from my perspective, it's easy for me to say this because I'm not the one who deals with the odor complaints, but, it's really, whatever is going to control sparking, because, obviously, you're also, going to have to, I guess, get approval from the building, department in terms of, its location and whatever, needs to be around it, in terms of, other fire control methods, possibly extinguisher, hoses, things, and I'm spouting because I'm not the building inspector who would ultimately approve this. And also what the distance would be to any of the, evergreen plantings, like the Norway spruces and whatnot, because I've been with him on site where we were walking and, we actually had a forester resident who was looking to move. They had to take their patio out because they never got a wetlands permit and they built part of it over their septic, but that's another story. But when he saw the outdoor fireplace, when we walked by, his comment was, "Oh, and look, this white pine is not too far away. That's not good either." So so those are like the types of things that they look at with respect to the siting of these as well. So there is some overlap.
Well,
So,
yes, I would
So you
feel
need to go
most,
down there.
so is it, Dennis, are you confident then that before building permit issues, that the engineering department will be taking a hard look at this?
They'll look to make sure that the wall is not above 2 feet, because then it would need engineering review, and the building inspector would be definitely taking a hard look at an outdoor fireplace for the issues that I've expressed.
All right, so then I guess what I'm asking is to the extent that you're confident that the building inspector is going to look at this, anyway, after we're done with it, you think it's necessary for us to take any action on it, or, put any kind of conditions on our permit, or do you think that it would be satisfactory if we ruled on the merits of just the wetlands permit and trust that the building inspector will be going over the issues with the fireplace?
That's reasonable, because we'll probably, I'm sure he'll consult with me a little bit, and we'll, probably look to, institute, more controls potentially than, say, as I said before, if this was next to a big body of water, so I would be okay with that.
well, I think if I might just put my 2 cents in, I think that if we're going to have a built structure, right, that's going to be reviewed by the various agencies, and if they want to put those safeguards in, like Dennis was saying, well, whether it's a cap or screens or a fire extinguisher or a hose or whatnot, that at least can be regulated, as opposed to some of like these freestanding things, which there's no jurisdiction over, you can just buy one off of Wayfair and start burning, so, I think that if safeguards need to be put in place, then, we'll do what we need to do.
Okay. Now, again, it was just my concern as to whether we, as part of our consideration of this permit, really needed to drill down and get ourselves comfortable on the details, or whether it wasn't sufficient and probably preferable to leave these kinds of issues to the building inspector, the engineering department, who are more familiar with them. Okay. Stephanie, Paul, anything else either of you want to add at this point?
No, sir.
No, thanks. I think we pretty well covered it.
Okay. Dennis? Have anything else we should discuss at this point, do you think?
I'm sorry, repeat. I spoke over you by accident.
I just want to know if you had anything else you thought we needed to discuss at this point on this.
No, I think they covered everything: mitigation, water quality, and we'll worry about amelioration of embers at the proper time.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Board members, any questions, concerns?
Not for me.
Oh. Okay. I think this has been a pretty thorough presentation. I think the process worked well with us having taken a look at it last year, and I think what you came back with looks like it makes a lot of sense. So hearing no objections, I'll entertain a motion to approve the project and issue the permit. Ivan making the motion.
Yep.
Second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Motion carries. Dennis will put the permit together, and guys will be on your way. Looks like a very, very nice project.
Great. Thank you so much. I appreciate all your time.
Thanks for the review. Appreciate it.
Our pleasure.
Thank you.
Our pleasure. Good luck with it.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
You too.
Me too.
Okay. So that's it. We never saw Ted.
Yeah, he was here, he was in and then he was out.
Was he?
Yeah, I saw him. He appeared in his car for a little while and then he wasn't.
He drove by.
Yeah.
Yeah, he did a drive-by. All right.
Hey.
Good. Anything else internally we need to discuss, Dennis? Anything going on at Town Hall we should know about?
So, yeah, the only item I added to the agenda, since I would have all of you at the same time, is
Oh, yes.
yeah. So tomorrow happens to be the kickoff meeting for this project between town staff, which would be myself and Kellen Cantrell, the assistant planner, the DEC project manager, Ingrid Hacker, and then, yes, there is a consulting firm made up mostly of, eco biotypes called Mad Scientist Associates. They're out of Ohio. They were the winning, I'd say consultant. I don't want to say winning bid because this was for professional services. And I wrote this up last year while we were applying for the grant. And if we didn't receive the grant, there would have been no project. So now that we received the grant from DEC, the way the project is going to unfold, obviously the consultant's going to be doing the work, but there's going to be these follow-up monthly coordination meetings. And, you know, we were looking to, and we kind of included some of this in the application to DEC, sort of, you know, coming up with a working group, not focus group really, working group, interested stakeholders, for lack of a better description, that, you know, would attend the monthly meetings, you know, not necessarily, I mean, you're free to review documents, but there isn't an expectation that you're going to be editing sections, writing sections, even reviewing sections. It's just sort of a presence of various parties that, you know, may have interest in the ultimate product here, which would be, you know, a natural resources inventory. The consultant, the way I had to write the scope based on some of the limitations for what the funding wouldn't be, I knew this was going to be a desktop assignment. I kind of eliminated all the potential for field work because that would have, you know, just, you know, made it, I think, too expensive and been a problem for receiving the grant. But, you know, for example, the Conservation Board was specifically mentioned and I believe encouraged actually through the application process. So they were mentioned as being, you know, sort of a town, you know, presence and board that would be present at these meetings. I had a conference call with Westchester Land Trust. They will also have representatives there, and they'll obviously be helpful because they've been involved with some of our other nearby neighbors like Mount Kisco and Bedford, Pound Ridge. They've all completed natural resources inventories. You know, as I said to the town board, I had to speak to them on this to get approval to apply and then approval to hire mad scientists. You know, we're kind of like the missing piece of the puzzle, you know, in terms of connectivity, because the other towns, you know, sort of have their NRIs. So
That's interesting. I mean, how come we're the ones lagging behind?
I don't know. I only came here in I mean, it's funny. I came on in 2019, and in one of the earliest conservation board meetings, this was brought up, and they're like, you know, how come we don't have one? And I said, okay, how come you don't have one? And shortly thereafter, in early, I mean, January of 2020, a gentleman who worked for DEC, I think through Cornell Cooperative, but was, you know, responsible for sort of, you know, helping applicants through the Hudson River Estuary Program grant application process. He came to speak to the board. He gave us a presentation, and then COVID hit, and that kind of stopped things for a while. So when the opportunity came around, when they announced a little less than a year ago about Hudson River Estuary Program grants for NRIs, we decided to apply because we needed one. So I know that doesn't answer your question, but that's what we got here.
Well, I guess I should have been more specific. Is this a question of, I mean, when did the other surrounding municipalities do theirs? Is this something that they've all had done for the last 10 years, or did everybody do that within the last 5 years, and, you know, we're just on the tail end of the normal cycle, or what?
That's about right. I think Mount Kisco's is dated 2015, which means they probably did some of the work a little prior. And then, you know, obviously there's a fudge factor because of the COVID factor. So yeah, sure. Okay, 5 years is reasonable. That seems okay. So in terms of, you know, from the regulatory side of things, because obviously, you know, the planning board, I guess we're going to, you know, extend this to them as well. You know, this document, I don't necessarily envision it to produce anything that is new, right? It's more of a compilation because you're really looking at existing mapping, existing data, you know, existing repositories. And, you know, for Newcastle, those pertinent subject areas, you know, geology, soils, aquatic resources, land use, recreational lands. Those are all going to be sections of a narrative, as well as, generating, which a lot of these NRIs do, a series of maps. But it's nice because it's going to sort of be that, we don't have usually if you don't have an NRI, you don't have that one-stop shop, right? It's, the applicant comes in, they have their plans, they show where the wetlands are, they show something mapped, but, contextually, you're just sort of looking at the property. And this document would allow, if a board member or a board would so choose, if you wanted to get more, sort of broader or mini regional in scope as to, reviewing a project and seeing, potentially what, surrounding impacts would or would not be based on those resources, it could have use for that. So other than that, I guess the purpose of this discussion was, I would imagine that these monthly meetings are going to happen during normal business hours, during the week. And, based on, my description and based on what an NRI is, and if you have any follow-up questions from me, if you saw, value or had interest as a board, to have members just, attend the monthly meetings, that was sort of the purpose of the discussion.
Mhm. Well, I don't know, but, leave it open, see what David and Ivan think. But I'm certainly interested. I think that, it's useful and appropriate for this board to be involved in some way. And my really only concern would be the practical one of having to attend meetings, that are during business hours when, the three of us, and Ted as well are all, full-time employed. And it might be difficult for us to attend in person or even by Zoom on a consistently required basis. But to the extent that, we could say, we want a placeholder, we want to be kept apprised, we want to be copied on everything, and, with the commitment that we would do our best to have somebody, attend as may be appropriate and, as our schedules would allow, I don't think there's any downside to us being involved.
If the meetings are online, I think that would give us a better chance of trying to, catch what we can. And it's a good idea just to send us the materials. It'd be interesting to follow along.
Okay.
And, and because to the extent, I guess, that you'll be involved, you'll be the staff for this, right? For the town?
Yeah, I guess it's, I wrote the RFP and it's been thrown in my hands. So yeah, that's how it works.
Right. So
Congratulations. Nice work.
Right.
Yeah, everybody's pretty excited about this, so thank you. Because everybody felt A, long overdue, and B, right, they don't want to be the last to the party. So kind of how it unfolded.
But so no, I would say yes, we're interested.
Okay.
Would like to be
I
involved.
will. Okay. Well, good timing. Tomorrow's the kickoff. I will definitely mention that, and we'll see how it goes in terms of deliverables, and obviously could share in those, and we'll let you know when those when those meetings will be, and if you can make them, you make them. But they will all be Zoom format.
Okay.
Or whatever. I think they have Zoom. Whatever it may be, it'll definitely be, yes, the remote.
But it'll be remote.
Internet based.
All right, for now.
Yes.
Okay. When is tomorrow's meeting?
1 o'clock.
Oh, that's interesting. I mean, if you want me to, I might be able to pop in for a little while at that point.
So I think for the kickoff, we're just gonna just have it those parties, because we've never, DEC, at least in the beginning, that's why a DEC project manager's got to be in.
Okay,
It's sort of like the first,
Yeah.
intro, and I'm sure they'll have stuff to say with respect to just the grant process, and so I frankly don't know how it's going to go. So less is better. No offense, because I just
No, that's fine.
sort of and then,
that's completely fine, but, that's nice, but in thinking about scheduling those, to the extent that they're, that they are sometimes around lunch hour, that would certainly make it more convenient for me to be able to schedule some time. Either that or closer to the end of the day. But,
okay, point noted.
I mean,
That
I
sounds good.
know that a lot of these meetings tend to be scheduled like 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock in the morning, which, personally tends to be my busiest time most of the time, but,
But that's a public service dynamic. You're right. I still have too much consulting in me. It's like whenever people want to meet, I'm like, yeah, fine, I'll do it.
all right. Good. Anything else? Did we get any responses to our outreach for new members?
I have not been informed, so I'd have to say no.
Okay.
Time to put your salary request in.
All right.
Negotiate your terms.
Yeah. Okay. Has everybody been responding to the emails about your mandatory training?
Coming up soon.
Done.
Oh, how was it?
I haven't done it
Fascinating.
last year.
I just finished 6 courses corporately. It was a long week of presentations.
Of the same ilk?
Yeah, exactly. Corporate governance, bribery, anti-corruption, all that. Besides being a good person. Hey, I heard something the other day, Dennis. I don't know if you've heard about this. That there's an issue associated with the school board's sale of a property, or pending sale of a property.
Yes, the Buttonhook property.
Yes, I just heard about that actually this afternoon. Any
Yeah.
insight on what's going on there?
Well, the background I know is that this is property that was, you know where it is, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well,
Apparently, apparently it was originally acquired in the 70s or 80s, and as the potential new site for a middle school. And matter of fact, when they were, thinking about and planning 7 Bridges, that was one of the alternative sites.
So is this the Zauderer property on?
Zauderer, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I remember that.
Yeah. And all the people who lived on Hog Hill were really pushing to have it there.
Yeah.
And I think they ended up, my recollection was they decided not to site it there because it was the least accessible. There was only that one way in off Buttonhook. And I think there was concern about alternative emergency exits or something like that. And then they determined, once 7 Bridges went somewhere else, the era of, belt tightening and increasing budgets and things like that, the school board decided that it was surplus property and that they could make a pretty penny by selling it to a developer to build houses. And they went pretty far along in an RFP process and a design process before, I'm not sure whether it's neighbors, I would assume a lot of it is neighbors, but came along and started objecting to it. And the primary ground that has seemed to be catch some fire the last 6 months or so, is tying it to the Native American history of the area.
That's what I heard today, yeah.
Right, which,
There's
you
some
know, I know
remnants
I've been
or-
following it, I've been following it on Facebook, and, you know, I joined the group that's, you know, that's active against it, just so that I could find out information and, you know,
Follow
I
along.
guess the link with Native American history is somewhat tenuous when it comes to that specific property. But that's the, you know, that's the argument that's being made to justify.
No, I heard today was that they've raised enough money to match the developer's offer to make the school board whole.
Really?
That somebody mentioned that today as the dogs were walking across each other. It was, have you heard? It was like, no.
That I hadn't heard.
Got to be a lot of money.
Sounded like a couple of $1 million.
And this was raised by donations from neighbors who want to keep the land undisturbed?
From locals, from out of state, out of country,
Oh,
interested parties, whatever that means. Like I said, it was just one person talking.
and what do they
something
get for the donation? They get some kind of a restriction on the sale of the property? Or
This group
development?
buys it and turns it over to somebody, I
Yeah,
guess. I
presumably
don't know
it
the
would
details.
become-
I
Oh,
just
they're
heard about this
buying,
today.
I see, they're buying it from the school board.
Right.
Right.
Got it.
And what would they do? Donate it to the town, or they would keep it as a private preserve, or?
I heard that there's a conservation area adjacent to it and another large private parcel that might be apart would be donated, and they would turn it into some sort of area and donate it or give it to somebody or manage it through this group.
And there's enough money to match the offer that's being made to the school board and to maintain that.
We're getting past the 5-minute
Okay.
dog walk conversation, but
Right.
I wasn't even aware of it. I just heard about it today.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, well, it's a largely hidden site. So, you know, it's not the kind of thing that you drive along one of the main roads and you say, you know, who owns this? I think it's surrounded on all sides basically by existing residential development.
I've found a old Indian burial ground ballpark in Puerto Rico. I found the African burial ground in Lower Manhattan. I found a ship's prow against the FDR Drive. It can be quite an experience.
Yeah. Well, as I said, my understanding, and who knows, you know, I don't think they've done any substantial, you know, architectural examination.
No phase 2 yet.
Yeah, but you know, it seems like all they've been saying is that, you know, this was the general area that was inhabited by these tribes.
Mhm.
And who knows?
The whole town of Chappaqua was a
Right, exactly.
no, interesting.
Anyway. All right.
Nope. Enjoy.
Dennis, do you have anything in the way of pipeline?
For the ERB, you're saying?
Yeah.
Well, application-wise, I think I just saw a building review letter for someone who wants a pool, and they got a stream in their backyard, so that'll be interesting. So I'm sure when they're ready to contact me for wetlands permits, I'll have to give them some information and say, you know, if you still want to go through with this, that'll be an ERB application for sure. And there are some violations that we issued last year, some can be corrected, fairly quickly as long as, they adhere to the timeline that I gave them. Others, they're going to appear before you. They just haven't gotten around to submitting yet, I guess. And I know that the building inspector is going to be out, I think this week and possibly next week. So, because he's tied to some of these as well. So when he returns, some people have surprised us and got us what we needed. So we're like, okay, good. We don't have to, send you before the judge or the ERB, and the others, we're going to have to, kind of loop back to them and say, listen, some time has passed, the holidays are over. Please get us applications, and they're going to be, ERB applications so that we could pursue these, violations. So unfortunately, it's more violation than project in my head as I'm speaking, kind of off the top of my head.
Okay. So we're gonna may not have a meeting next month?
Yeah, it comes up quick, right? Because this one got pushed to the
Right.
extra Monday. So yes, that is a possibility.
Okay. Just let us know.
All right,
Will do.
no problem.
All right, guys.
All right.
Yeah, that's it.
To adjourn.
I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I will
Motion.
move.
Second.
All in favor? Let's go. See you guys soon. Stay warm.
All right. Bye, everyone.